The Royals have a couple of guys they're planning to return off the injured list, but who is close and who is not? We'll dive into that in this edition of Locked On Royals.
You are Locked On Royals, your daily Kansas City Royals podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
You are tuned into Locked On Royals on the Locked On Podcast Network. As always, I'm your host, Jack Johnson, and you can find me on Twitter or X at JohnnyJ_15. That's at JOHNYJ_15. You also can catch us on wherever you get your podcast. That can be Spotify, Apple Podcast, Amazon Music, Google Podcast. We're on Odyssey and we're on YouTube. Just be sure to hit that follow button and subscribe. If you're a first-time listener and you want to know a little bit more about me and this show, I'm based here in Kansas City. I work at Sports Radio 810 WHB, doing some hosting, some co-hosting, and a little bit of producing as well. But when it comes to this podcast, when you click on this link, you're going to be getting 30 straight minutes of Royals baseball. Today's show is brought to you by PrizePicks. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnMLB and use code all lowercase LockedOnMLB to win $50 instantly when you play $5. Well, you might be just finishing up the episode we did last night. If you didn't stay up past midnight like I was, tuning in to the Tigers and the Padres game, you'll get 2 episodes today, technically, because you'll be watching the one from last night in the morning, and then you're going to be getting this one sometime in the afternoon. But the Royals will be having an off day today, a much-needed off day before they host the Minnesota Twins. The last time they will see Minnesota in the regular season. The only other way it would happen is meeting in somewhere in that bracket from the American League side. Likely, I think with the way things are shaking out, it'd have to be in the American League Championship Series. So this could be it. This could be the last time you see Minnesota, and it's no surprise whatsoever that they have had the Royals numbered this year. They have beaten up on the Royals. They've beaten up on them in Kansas City back on opening day, and they also beat up on them the 2 times they went to Target Field to play them in Minnesota. So we're going to talk about that in our final segment today. But to kick off the show today, I feel like it was the perfect time to go over the injury report, where everybody is at. Andy Rogers, who covers the team for MLB.com, did a fantastic update and article, and a great couple of articles over the last few days. But this one, very beneficial to everybody out there wondering, where are some of these guys? When is the timeline for some of these guys? Or what does that timeline look like? You've got guys like Hunter Renfroe on the IL. You got Michael Lorenzen, Hunter Harvey, Will Smith, even guys that have been on the injured list all season long, like Josh Taylor, the left-hander they acquired from Boston last year. That was the Adalberto Mondesi trade, if you didn't know who Josh Taylor was. And then you also have somebody like Dan Altavilla, who was up with the big league team in the middle of the season, and then got hurt not long after he was up with the big league team. So just wanted to get a rundown of where everybody is at. You got to give credit to Andy Rogers for posting this out there. This is not me giving you an update on where all these guys are or what their injuries look like or if they've had any setbacks. So go give her a follow on Twitter and at Annie_Rogers. Does a great job. And Jalen Thompson as well, covering the team for the KC Star. They've both done a phenomenal job this year, providing some insight for the Royals. In a season like this, where with the 21 games to go, they are firmly in a playoff spot and can move into second place with either a Minnesota loss today or by taking the series from Minnesota over the weekend. So, as for this injury report, let's kick things off with Hunter Renfroe. There really isn't too much of a concern with him. Right now, he's on a rehab assignment with AA Northwest Arkansas, and there is a chance that he would likely join the team this weekend when taking on the Minnesota Twins. Andy Rogers writes, Renfroe has been sidelined since August 24th when he strained his hamstring on a play in the outfield. It was a low-grade strain, which meant he was able to return to baseball activity after a few days of rest. He's been hitting, running, and participating in defensive drills this week at Kauffman Stadium to check all the boxes for a return. Now he just needs a few at-bats and play a full go in a game to make sure he's ready for a return. So he's got a rehab assignment. It was either last night or it's going to be today. And then I would expect him to join the team in Kansas City against Minnesota. If not then it would probably be for that series against the Yankees at the beginning of next week. So to me, Hunter Renfroe's on track to return. It felt like when they put him on the injured list, there wasn't too much of a concern that he was going to be out that long. And they certainly need that bat back in the lineup. That would give some flexibility with who they've been playing. You could run Hunter Renfroe and Tommy Pham out there in the same day, or Robbie Grossman or MJ Melendez. Just more of a middle of the lineup bat that the Royals have been desperately needing in the midst of this offensive stretch where they've really struggled. But Hunter Renfroe should be back any time now. That's not really a concern, and it wasn't a concern when they placed him on the injured list. And also a little bit of news in this injury report. CJ Alexander, who had debuted for the Royals a little bit ago, he was claimed off waivers by the Oakland Athletics. So if you were hoping to see CJ Alexander back at the big league level for Kansas City, that is not going to happen, at least for this year, for that matter. And maybe not for the rest of his career. Who knows what that looks like for CJ Alexander. Now, Will Smith, who went on the injured list after that Philadelphia series with back spasms, he is still trending in a positive direction to return to this team in September. I know there's going to be some people listening not loving the sound of that because Will Smith wasn't pitching well before he went on the injured list. But maybe you can have a direct correlation to those back spasms and how he looked compared to how he had looked for the better part of 3 months. I mean, he wasn't throwing in high leverage situations, but there were a couple of times he was pitching in low leverage spots before the injured list stint, and it wasn't good at all. It was very much the beginning of the year, Will Smith, where he couldn't get anybody out. He was giving up a ton of home runs. He was dealing with lots of base runners, and he wasn't throwing strikes. But Will Smith is still trending in a positive direction there. He went on the 15-day injured list, it looks like, back on the 25th of August. So Smith threw his first bullpen on September 4th, and the Royals will see how he feels afterward to determine the next step. So with 21 games to go, if there is any sort of setback, it wouldn't shock me if the Royals just decide to not have him back in the big league bullpen because of the way Daniel Lynch has been pitching and the way Carlos Hernandez has been pitching. Here's a name that I think everybody is wanting to know a lot about, and that's Hunter Harvey, who went on the injured list with mid-back tightness. His expected return is still September, but at this point, it has to be September. A lot of these guys have an expected return of September because it's not likely they're just going to miraculously return to full strength in October when they have the postseason rosters out. But August 10th is when Hunter Harvey went on the injured list, and that was retroactive to August 7th. So he is more than past that 15-day IL stint. He's had a couple of setbacks. He suffered a setback in his rehab program on August 20th when he had to receive a cortisone injection because the back wasn't loosening up as much as the Royals would have liked to see at this point. And he threw again on September 1st. If you remember us referencing that about him getting back up on the bump and trying to work things out, well, he did not bounce back well. The next day, manager Matt Cotrero said in this article done by Annie Rogers, with symptoms returning following the bullpen. Harvey did not throw on the 3rd or the 4th, and it's become a day-to-day situation as he and the Royals see how he feels to determine the next steps of this process. At this point, I am not expecting Hunter Harvey to return. I think Hunter Harvey will be sidelined the rest of the year, but they still have him for an additional year of control, and maybe at this point, that's the best course of action. And to get him the rest in the offseason, they're not going to be overworking him in spring training early on next year. You have him for one more year. And I know the Royals gave up a decent package to go get Hunter Harvey to help this team's bullpen, but they do have him for next year. And hopefully with more rest, not being overworked, Hunter Harvey can be far more valuable to the bullpen next year than he really could be trying to force it this year. So in my opinion, I don't expect to see Hunter Harvey back anytime soon. Michael Lorenzen with the hamstring strain he suffered on August 27th in that series against Cleveland last week. It was a grade 2 hamstring strain, and the Royals placed him on the 15-day IL with a 2 to 3 week timeline for his return. Yesterday, because it's the 5th today on September 4th, Lorenzen threw from 90 feet. He still needs to throw a bullpen before the Royals can determine the exact timeline for his return. I would expect Michael Lorenzen to join this team at the very tail end of September. Hopefully you can get him in mid-September, but I don't think there's a need to rush it. You want him to be healthy for the postseason if the Royals do, of course, get there. But to me, Michael Lorenzen seems to be progressing well. A bullpen's going to determine a lot of that. But when they put him on the injured list and they said, look, it's a 2 to 3 week timeline for him, I think you trust the trainers and you trust the coaching staff there with when they expect Michael Lorenzen to return to baseball action. And for Vinny Pasquantino, I know that most people have written him off, that he's not going to be able to return because of that 6 to 8 week timeline with the broken thumb. Believe he has had surgery, and that at this point, it's just about making sure that heals up before any sort of rehab process can start. But Vinny did say he's going to do everything he can to be ready for the postseason. He did have surgery on Tuesday, that would have been. So at this point, it's just about making sure that thing heals properly. And if the Royals get that far in the postseason, maybe they can have Vinny Pasquantino back in that roster, or back on that roster, and back in that lineup. But I'm just not holding my breath. And as for the 60-day guys, you got Josh Taylor, who we brought up. He had left arm and biceps nerve injury. He's expected to return in September, but he's kind of ramping it back up back in Arizona right now. I don't envision him joining this team at any point in the year, and maybe just look to a return next year if he can surprise people in spring training. And as for Dan Altavilla, kind of the same thing, a right lat strain, expected to return in September, but I don't envision him being in the bullpen for Kansas City at any point this year, at least returning to this bullpen. And then Kyle Wright, who they acquired from Atlanta this past offseason, was a 20-game winner at one point, but his other years haven't been that great. And he's recovering from right shoulder surgery, but the timeline was always going to be for next year. So I would anticipate Kyle Wright being ready to go by spring training 2025. We're going to take our first break of the show. When we come back, speaking of starting pitching and the rotation, it kind of feels like they are regaining their strength and they are looking better down the final stretch of the season. We're going to dive into that next on Locked On Royals. You are tuned into Locked On Royals on the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm your host, Jack Johnson, and you can find me on Twitter or X at JohnnyJ_15. Want to give a shout out to our first sponsor today in PrizePicks. It's America's #1 daily fantasy sports app with over 5 million active members. It's also the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. And unlike other apps, on PrizePicks, it's just you against the numbers. All you do is pick more or less on 2 to 6 player stat projections and watch the winnings roll in. And you can win up to 100 times your money on PrizePicks with as little as 4 correct picks. And they put their members first, so all withdrawals are fast, safe, and secure. When my picks hit, I can get the money in as quick as 15 minutes. So download the PrizePicks app today and use code LOCKEDONMLB and get $50 instantly when you play $5. That's code LOCKEDONMLB on PrizePicks to get $50 instantly when you play $5. You don't even need to win to receive the $50 bonus. It is guaranteed. PrizePicks, run your game. I kind of had this thought last night after Seth Lugo had hurled 7 innings of a 1-run ball against Cleveland, becoming the stopper for this 7-game losing streak, that you go over those previous 7 losses and you include last night's win. The Royals' rotation is not just looking better, it's looking stronger. It's looking like they are rested. And maybe that was having an extra guy to just go to in the rotation, having Alec Marsh, having Michael Lorenzen, having a couple off days before that 14-game stretch in 13 days. But Seth Lugo, who was looking on fumes after that outing against, I want to say it was Minnesota at Target Field, or maybe it was the start right after that where he didn't look as sharp. Maybe it was Boston. I can't quite recall. But Seth Lugo was looking like the inning workload was really affecting him. And then in this losing streak, he throws 7 innings of 1-run ball against Houston in a hitter's ballpark against a good lineup, and he gets outdueled by Framber Valdez, who throws 7 no-hit innings. So Seth Lugo didn't get any favors from his lineup, but still absolutely good enough against Houston when the Royals lost that game last weekend. Then last night, he throws 7 innings again of 1-run ball. He was the stopper, and now he's just 14 innings away from 200, and yet last night and the start before that looked as good as he did back in April or back in May or back in June. And they were against playoff teams, first-place teams, and the Houston Astros and the Cleveland Guardians. I go to the next guy in line who will start on Friday against Zebby Matthews and the Minnesota Twins, Cole Reagans. It wasn't pretty last time out in giving up 5 runs in 5 innings, but all of those runs came in the 6th. And you forget maybe that in the first 5 innings, he gave up 1 hit and struck out 10. And he had struck out 8 consecutive Astros hitters. When you're still getting the strikeout totals there, and by the way, Cole Reagans is 3 away from 200. on the year. And I think that would be the first 200 strikeout guy since Zach Greinke, if I'm not mistaken, in his Cy Young season. So it's been a very long time. Not even Danny Duffy from the left side got the 200 strikeouts. In fact, he had broken Danny Duffy's record for left-handed pitchers with most strikeouts in a single season. And he's pacing to have one of the best K per 9 seasons by any Royals pitcher in franchise history. But you look at that, he could be running out of gas. He's got a big inning workload this year. He has shattered his previous career high, and yet he can strike out 8 consecutive guys, have 10 Ks in 5 innings. Yes, an inning slipped away from him, but that can happen, right? He didn't get any support from his offense, and the Royals really didn't give any starter support in that series against the Houston Astros. I go to the number 3 spot, Michael Wacha. Michael Wacha didn't work deep into the game on Monday, but you want to make sure he stays fresh for the postseason, assuming you get there. He has been the Royals' most consistent arm for the better part of 2 months, really going back to June 1st. He has been nailed. So I can go to 3 months for that matter. He has just been incredible for the Royals rotation. And he is somebody in a wild card series that I think you could turn to as the elimination game starter. You know, if the Royals find a way to win one of the first 2 in a wild card series, I'm fine with turning to Michael Wacha in game 3. Then you go to the 4th starter. I think this is as good as Brady Singer's looked all year. You know, he was challenged for he can't pitch well against good teams, against playoff teams, and he pitched fantastically against the Houston Astros. Didn't really get much run support, but a quality start there. He was an out away from a quality start against the Cleveland Guardians, and he didn't get much run support in that game, but he has done a really good job of limiting damage, of pitching better with runners in scoring position. And I think his stuff overall has looked a lot better. It seems to have more bite to it. It seems to have more movement, more velocity. And he is somebody I would love to see the Royals utilize in a playoff game as kind of that bulk guy. You can stack somebody. You know, if Michael Wacha throws 4 innings, why not throw Brady Singer out there for 2 or 3? I think his stuff is playing really well right now. And I've got a lot of confidence in what Brady Singer can give you from the number 4 spot in the rotation. And then you get to the 5 spot. Alec Marsh, I think, is just fine. We're going to see him on Saturday. That game will be televised on Fox, so a big-time national TV game. Bailey Ober against Alec Marsh. I've actually been pretty pleased with what Alec Marsh has given the Royals since coming back from Omaha. It's not been exceptional, but I do think that swing and miss is back a little bit, and I like him in a hybrid role. I like him throwing 2 to 4 innings. I know that he'll probably have to throw 5 innings every time out until Michael Lorenzen returns, but once Lorenzen returns, I like Alec Marsh coming out of the bullpen, and assuming Michael Lorenzen can pick back up where he left off, there's 5 guys right now that seem to be at full strength. Maybe not everybody's at full strength, but look to be picking up some steam going into October. That's the best sign for this team because that's the strongest aspect of this team. If the Royals had been limping into the postseason with a depleted rotation, don't even bet money on any of those games that they could win. Don't bet money on game 1 or game 2 because if those guys are gassed at that point, they're not going to win. The offense isn't good enough to pick up a bad start from one of those guys. The bullpen isn't good enough to pick up 5-6 innings if the starters can't go deep into the game. So having those guys at near full strength or near 100% is a blessing for this team. And it almost makes you stomach that losing streak a little bit more because the rotation looks so good. If the rotation had been battered around in this losing streak, I think I'm really getting concerned for not just how they'd fare in the postseason, but if they could even hold on to their postseason spot, if they could hang on to a 5.5 game lead. But right now, the rotation, I have no issues with. And I'm excited to see how Cole Reagans looks in front of a packed Kauffman Stadium crowd on Friday. Excited to see what Alec Marsh can look like, and excited to see what Michael Wacha can look like in the series finale on Sunday. Should be great weather all weekend long. We got Chiefs tonight for the off day, so you can see me repping my Chiefs logo, my Chiefs pullover going into work today. And then on Saturday, you got a college football slate, but a big-time series against the Minnesota Twins this coming weekend at Kauffman Stadium. We're going to take our final break of the show. When we come back, let's preview that 3-game series against the Twins, the pitching matchups, how the Twins have been playing, and what is on the line at Kauffman Stadium. That's coming up on Locked On Royals. You are tuned into Locked On Royals in the Locked On Podcast Network. I am your host, Jack Johnson. Before we get into our sponsor talk, we want to thank you for making Locked On Royals your first listen today. For your second listen, enjoy the Locked On MLB podcast as host Pat Sullivan, aka Sully, is here daily to provide national expertise with his trademark humor to help you get ready for the MLB playoffs here in the dog days of summer. Prepare for the Fall Classic with Sully, who has it all covered every single day on Locked On MLB, available on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And we also want to let you know about Ibotta. And with Ibotta, there's lots of great deals going around. You got sandals, sunscreen, and snacks that you might need for the kids. Even though it's fall, we still got a little bit of warm weather here in Kansas City. So don't stress about the cost of those things. Use Ibotta and get cash back on all your purchases when you stock up on all of your summer essentials. Maybe you're taking that dream vacation, but dreading the cost. With Ibotta, you get cash back on all your purchases so you can spend more time making memories this summer and less time dreaming about them. Ibotta is a free app that lets you earn cash back every time you shop, and you can earn on hundreds of items from groceries to beauty supplies, even toys, so you can make sure you're beating inflation no matter what you're purchasing. Right now, Ibotta is offering our listeners $5 just for trying Ibotta by using code LOCKEDONMLB when you register. Just go to the App Store or the Google Play Store and download the free Ibotta app to start earning cash back and use code LOCKEDONMLB. That's IBOTTA in the Google Play or the App Store and use code LOCKEDONMLB. The Royals will see the Minnesota Twins for the final time in the regular season at Kauffman Stadium this weekend. They've got their off day. They can sleep in their own beds. They're not having to travel and get in somewhere to a new city at 3 a.m. They get the full experience of a true off day. They can watch the Chiefs tonight, hopefully a win for Kansas City, and then they can get to the ballpark tomorrow in the afternoon and get ready for a Twins team that is, at this point, record-wise, just as good as the Royals. And I think the Royals, going into this year, felt like they were comparable to Minnesota, but I can't say the same thing about the Twins. I don't think the Twins had considered how good the Royals would be. I think the Twins went into this season thinking this division should be easy to take. And yet here we are on September 5th, and 4 teams in the division are fighting for a playoff spot. 4 teams in the division are 500 or better. There's just a asterisk there and an offsetting deal that the Chicago White Sox are the worst team in sports history. I'm not even going to just say baseball. I think they are the worst professional team in sports history. And I know that the Royals and the White Sox have a rivalry. I don't think White Sox fans deserve that at all. Ownership has completely failed them, and no baseball team should ever be that bad and experience that many long losing streaks and have 109 losses with 20-plus games to go. That's just absurd to even talk about. But nonetheless, you look at the top half of the American League Central. At this point, Cleveland is pulling away a little bit. They lead the Royals and the Twins by 4.5 games with 21 to go. I think you go as far as saying that this set could dictate second place in the American League Central. This is a very good Minnesota team. No, they are not playing their best baseball right now, and they're not going to be throwing their heavy hitters in the rotation at you. That's just the way that it worked out. The Royals do have some favorable matchups in these games, and it all begins on Friday when Cole Reagans will be going for Kansas City. Remember, he started all the way back on opening day against Minnesota, and they had Pablo Lopez to throw on that day, but he is throwing in the series finale against the Rays, as the Twins will try to avoid a sweep, but they'll get to avoid Pablo Lopez in this series. So on Friday, it's going to be Zebby Matthews, who the Royals saw back at Target Field. He was good enough against them. He had been called up to start just that game, but it has not been a very good year for Zebby Matthews in general, and really, it's because of one outing that absolutely slipped away from him, and that was against Toronto back on the 31st of August. He had some consistency in his first couple of starts of the year. He went 5 innings, gave up 2 against the Royals on August 13th. Then he threw 5 innings of 2-run ball against the Padres at Petco Park. And then against the Cardinals, he threw 5 innings of 1-run ball. So there was 3 good starts there on August 13th, August 19th, and August 25th. But then his start against Toronto on August 31st, that was at home at Target Field, ballooned his ERA from 3.00 to 7.41. He gave up 9 runs, 10 hits, in just 2 innings of work. So when you look at Zebby Matthews' total, yeah, I would say overall, I mean, I can't say it's been a good year because your ERA is still 7.41. I don't care if it's one start of the 4. I know that it's not the biggest sample size, but a 7.41 ERA is a 7.41 ERA. The Royals have seen him. They've got a little bit of a book on him, and he's not pitching at Target Field. He's pitching at Kauffman Stadium in front of what is likely to be a very big crowd. Not sure if that'll affect him too much, but there is at least a book on Zebby Matthews now, and one that is a successful one for at least one team in Toronto last time out. The Royals can look at that, and they can also look at how they attacked Zebby Matthews when he made his season debut for the Twins back in the middle of August. So it'll be Cole Reagans going up against Zebby Matthews on Friday, 7:10 first pitch in that game. Cole Reagans, of course, coming off a start in which things kind of slipped away in that 6th inning. He had struck out 10 through 5 innings, 5 shutout innings, I should say, and then gave up all 5 of his runs in the 6th inning, and that allowed the Astros to pull away. On Saturday, this game will be televised on Fox. It'll be Alec Marsh going up against Bailey Ober, who has been much better in the second half, however, has really pitched poorly against the Royals in 2024. He might be the one guy that has really been tagged in every single start that he's faced the Royals. Like Hunter Brown, who the Royals saw last week, gave up 9 runs and 2/3 of an inning against the Royals back in April, and then was nails against the Royals when he saw him at Minute Maid Park. But you go back to March, the very end of March, when Bailey Ober faced the Royals, and he gave up 8 runs, 3 home runs, and an inning and a third. That was his first start of the year. So he already got 9 runs given up to the Royals in 2024. Then he saw the Royals again on May 29th. This was at Target Field. And he gave up 6 runs in 5 innings. So it wasn't like that start on March 31st was fluky or anything. The Royals did nearly the same amount of damage. He was able to work deeper into that game. But 15 runs in 6 1/3. That was what he had going into June. He did not see the Royals when they visited the Twins at Target Field in August. So those are the totals for Bailey Ober going into Saturday night. He's given up 15 runs in 6 1/3 against the Royals this year. And now it's the 3rd time they get to see him. They're not going to have Vinny Pasquantino out there. There are different guys in the lineup like Tommy Pham, Robbie Grossman, Yuli Gurriel, Paul DeYoung. But there still are a lot of guys that have success over Bailey Ober that will be hitting in this game. So though he's been very good in the second half, bad numbers against the Royals in 2024. And Alec Marsh, he's going to be getting his 3rd start since being recalled from Kansas City. Again, I didn't think he was terrible against the Astros. 3 earned runs, 5 innings pitched, got 5 strikeouts in that outing as well. And he was 1 out from 5 innings and 2 earned runs against Cleveland when he started game 2 of that doubleheader. Like I said, I have not been disappointed from what Alec Marsh has given the Royals since being recalled from Omaha. And then on Sunday, it'll be Michael Wacha going for his 12th win in a Royals uniform, going up against Simeon Woods Richardson. The Royals did get a little bit of a look into Simeon Woods Richardson earlier in the year. That game came at Target Field, in which he went 5 innings, allowed just 2 earned runs, walked 2, struck out 4. So not an elite stat line, kind of very comparable to what Zebby Matthews did against the Royals. But Simeon Woods Richardson has struggled in his last 7 starts. He only went 3 2/3 against Tampa back on September 2nd. Gave up 6 hits, 3 earned runs in that, struck out only 2 in that outing. Only went 4 2/3 against Atlanta, gave up 4 earned in that game, walked 3, struck out 3. Against San Diego at Petco Park, 5 innings, but did only give up 1 earned run and struck out 7. So that was more than a good enough start against the Padres. Against the Rangers, he gave up 2 earned in 5 innings, went 7 innings, gave up 2 earned against the Cleveland Guardians. Then against the White Sox, he only went 4 innings and gave up 3 earned runs. So in the month of August, he had an ERA of 4.21. Not good, not great. But then he did get roughed up in his last outing at Tropicana Field against the Tampa Bay Rays. So he will go on Sunday against Micah Walker, who's coming off his 5-inning outing against the Twins on Labor Day, or excuse me, the Guardians on Labor Day. So hopefully a better version of Micah Walker, or at least a Micah Walker that can work deeper into the game on Sunday afternoon. First pitch is at 1:10 p.m. Central Time. Well, that's going to do it for another edition of Locked On Royals on the Locked On Podcast Network. I've been your host, Jack Johnson, and you can always find me on Twitter or X at JohnnyJ_15. Thank you for making Locked On Royals your first listen today. Now go check out Locked On MLB Podcast. Prepare for the Fall Classic with Sully, who has it all covered every single day, and you can find the link to Locked On MLB in the description, so you don't need to search. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Tomorrow, we're going to have a Mailbag Friday, and then for our final episode of the week, I'm actually going to do it on Sunday after the Twin series, so we can have a little bit of a weekend episode there. Not going to get a second episode in tonight or tomorrow, so look forward to the final episode of the week coming up on Sunday. But until tomorrow morning, you take it easy, Kansas City.